Oi! Headhunter!
What is up, everybody? Joel Algie here, the human headhunter, and I am here with Riece. He is the founder of Vault Recruiting and the Vault Academy, and we're glad to have him on the show here. It's a pleasure. So, Riece, welcome to the Headhunter Hideout. How is everything in your world? Have a good Thanksgiving?
Yeah, man, it was great. Just spent some time with family and obviously ate too much, as everybody does. But it was great. How about yours?
It was good, man. It was good. Nice time with the family, and then you get back to Monday, and it's just insanity. So
I'd honestly forgotten that we booked this today, after the Thanksgiving break. I was like, oh, okay, gotta get back in the game mode.
Well, I know, and I did the because I don't think we touched base since we last talked. So I was like, okay, I bet this invite, or I bet the the notice for the show is just going to be a reminder for you. So I'm glad you're still able to make it, man. I'm still able to make it. So yeah, I'd love to just hear from you a little bit about how you got started in the recruiting game, and just give us a little bit of background on what you're doing right now, and just go from there.
Yeah, totally. So I got into recruiting pretty much as everybody does. I just fell into it. So what happened was I got a college degree in finance and economics, and then I was working as a financial analyst as a boutique. Long story short, we lost a bunch of clients. I ended up getting laid off, and it was a little bit of like a system shock, right? Because I just spent probably closer to 4.5 years getting my degree. I've been working for somewhere like 8 months, and then it was like, oh my God, now I'm off the market. People are going to look at me and he got let go after 8 months. This guy probably sucks. Have I just lost my whole career after just a little bit? So I got a little bit lost there. I started doing some e-commerce, had a little mini business that I was running. But the way that I got into it is I had a friend who was working at Robert Half, and there was an opening on their finance and accounting team. And I had no idea what recruiting was. I knew what a headhunter was, and you think they're there's mysterious figures that operate in the shadows, but I didn't really know that much about what they did. And so when my friend actually gave my name to the hiring manager, he just told me hey, I give him your name, you're going to give him a call. And so I got the call, and I was just like, I don't want to be a recruiter. I don't know what this is. I do finance. I'm good. But since, I'd been referred in, I at least took the interview just to keep up appearances and what have you. So I went in for the first interview, and I just honestly, I was hooked. They took me into the bullpen. I was hearing other recruiters negotiate salaries live with hiring managers, closing candidates. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So I ended up taking the job, which was at Robert Half. I was there for, I think 3.5 years. I did well there. I got promoted a couple times, once to senior, and then again to oversee, our San Francisco finance and accounting team. But after 3 years, I just thought I feel like I want to be able to work with clients a little bit more on my own terms and just kind of take control of my destiny a little bit. It's a 40,000 person company. So I founded Vault Recruiting, which what we do is we specialize primarily in working with startups in the San Francisco Bay Area. I now live in Minneapolis, but the Bay Area is where I'm from. It's where it's where my roots are, so that's where I wanted to stick with. And we do a variety of things. So the first thing that we do is what I call recruiting as a service, which is similar to RPO, in which we will provide an embedded recruiter into the startups team, and they'll either function as the only source of in-house talent, or they'll work with the rest of the team and the head of talent or what have you. And then the other thing is that we'll do is a contingent or retained search for all of the corporate functions that startups need. So that's one part of it. I've been doing that since March of last year. It's done really well. Took a hit because of coronavirus for obvious reasons, but that's been great. And then the other thing that I'm doing is Vault Academy. Vault Academy is something that I'm really passionate about. And what we do is we provide a training ecosystem for recruiting agencies. So, given the fact that I recruit recruiters, I grew up in the recruiting agency world, the story that I hear over and over is I fell into it, just like everybody else did. I didn't get a
Yep.
whole lot of training. I was just kind of sent in, given a little like over the shoulder work, shadowed a couple senior recruiters' calls, had them shadow some of my interviews, and that's it, right? And that's fine, but it doesn't give you the structured training that's really needed to succeed. Like when that happens, you're doing post-mortem on problems, right? It's like, I screwed up. What could I have done better? Versus like, let me be prepared for the situation when I come into it. So I created Vault Academy, which again is a full training ecosystem for recruiting agencies. We have a full desk program. We have a business development only program, and then a recruiting only program. And we're continuing to build more out. So I'm really excited about that. So that's my very long-winded intro. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, I was going to. I just want to quickly just jump in to say hi to a couple people. So I know Matt Perkins said hi. I believe this is Momo, who also said hi. I know they got the profile blocked on there. Aaron says hi, and then Brian says great info, guys. Boston, representing Boston, and then we also had a couple of these posts as well. So if you want to get on a new job board, I guess Fernando is the guy to call. But anyway, okay, well. I'm curious, man. So, because I've heard that Robert Half has like a great training program. So, what I guess inspired you to start your own academy to help people with training? I mean, was there something that you had noticed, or I guess what was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. So the training program. I'm hoping I'm not going to get into any trouble here because I don't really like you saying this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the training program that I got was, and I'll preface this by saying I was lucky to work with, oh, hey, Marcus, with, I believe it was the number 4 office in the world at the time. So I was surrounded by literally world-class people that I could just, learn from osmosis with. The actual formal training that I received, I think I went in for about 3 months. About when I was 3 months in, and we went to it was a 2 to 3 day training offsite, where it was, it's a combination of like role plays and learning about the job and learning also like technical stuff, like how to use Salesforce and what have you. But it was about after 3 months, which ideally it would have been earlier, but I recognize, of course you have cohorts and they can't always have people come in like right when they start. And then there was some ongoing training. I think I went to maybe 1 more or 2 more the year after that. So it was good, but to give some context, when I was there, I was in that initial training class, I was 1 of 38. And it was about after 2.5 years, I was feeling admittedly a little bit dejected. And so what I decided to do, I was like, oh, you know what, let me just look up some of the people from my old training class. I'll catch up. Maybe it'll throw me out of my funk. And as I started looking, I realized I was the last man standing out of 38 people.
Wow.
After that relatively short period of time. And so when I caught up with a couple of them, I heard the same story over and over, which was, after 3 months, you're expected to produce 25K a month. And you just, you get a few days of training and you're off to the races. So the training content itself was great, but when it's only accessible in these, short workshops, it's just not ideal. And again, Robert Half has some of the best training that's out there, and these smaller agencies do even less than that. And so it just really gave me kind of a little bit of a eureka moment when I was like, there's something that's really needed here. And so that's why I decided to create it.
No, and I love it. And I think we discussed this too on a call prior. And I think it's a major issue with most recruitment firms is, not just the actual training, but then the length of the training. I think there's that idea that, people either sink or swim, which I think there is some truth, but then there's also, I've talked to different people on the show where there's different skill sets. Like there's a business development skill set. There's a relationship management skill set. There's an actual recruiting skill set. There's a sourcing skill set. And I think a lot of times, like we've been trained to look for somebody that has all of those skill sets, and they're the only people that can be successful. But sometimes it's just a case of looking at where people are actually strong and where the skill sets are, and then doubling down on that and creating teams where people are actually allowed to function within their skill set. So you mentioned you've got the business development course as well. I guess in terms of enrollment, are you seeing like a pretty even enrollment, or are you seeing more people just like, we need the overall training? What's been your experience with that?
So the ones that are the one that's by far the most heavily enrolled in so far is the flagship course, which is the Full Desk Recruiter, because that teaches both. The way that the recruiting and then the biz dev courses work is it's taken from the same material, but a lot of agencies are running split desks where you're only doing recruiting or only doing biz dev. So what I've heard is like, hey, we don't need all of this, right? AJ, like just give us, what they're actually doing. So from the business that's come in so far, it's been either full desk or recruiting and matching. We do have a pretty large deal in the pipeline for the biz dev side, but it's mostly, I'd say like 70-75% full desk.
Got it. Awesome. So okay. So like with the biz dev side, is it
Yeah.
purely cold calling, or give us a little bit of a rundown on what kind of what you're covering in that course?
Yeah. So what we do is we take out the recruitment aspect of it. So it still has an overview of the recruiting industry. It has the mindset that you have to have in order to succeed in the recruiting agency, which is essentially a sales mindset, right? We cover a little bit of LinkedIn, personal branding and social selling. We cover planning. We cover several different methods of lead gen. So there's taking candidates to market via, some people call it MPC, some call it speccing. We cover ad calls, backfill calls, cross-selling calls. There's email scripts, voicemail scripts. We talk about how to build a cadence and, whether you're doing it through an email automation system or doing it manually. How to follow up. And then once you get the job order, then we talk about how to cover the job order intake call. And then we also cover the account management side of it. So managing clients throughout the interview process and then all the way through the close and onboarding.
Awesome. I love it. So in terms of like the actual length of the course, how long is the overall course on either side of it?
So Full Desk Recruiter, from what we've seen so far, it takes about 25 hours to get through. So it's a combination of video, text, quizzes, and then there's offline assignments that you're asked to do. Some of those might be role plays. Some of them might be, go according to what I've showed you in this chapter, like go redo your LinkedIn, right? And so with all of that, it's entirely self-paced, but just from the data that I've been able to see, we're looking at about 25 hours. Okay.
Awesome. And what do you, I guess when you're bringing people through, is there a certain area that you feel like most recruiters are kind of weak in, or then not being trained effectively? Like, obviously there's some in-house training with most recruitment agencies. So what's like the big piece that you're seeing is missing across the board?
I think the biggest piece is kind of the nuances of almost every aspect, I would say. So for example, there's a lot of, closing is a big one. There's different levels of nuances to closing, of course, but there's, in the course, I believe there's 8 or 9 different closing techniques that you can use. We talk about matching at a really granular level. And we also talk about basically like building relationships. We talk about, we talk about how important that is and how we can't just be transactional here if we're going to survive. I would say that probably where most recruiters get their training is they usually are pretty decent at sourcing, right? Because that's easy to show, like here's how this Boolean search goes. Go on the computer and do this and see what type of results you get. I think where the course really shines is in those situational training aspects that you can't really, you can role play them, but you can't practice them live like on a computer, right? So I think that's where a ton of the value comes from.
And what about in terms of the size of the course? Is it like a one-on-one, or do you get to go in like a group of people, like, and how is it, like one-on-one with you, or like how do the modules work?
So it's all online. It's entirely self-paced. There are discussions enabled, so that, like, say if you have a comment or a question on a lesson, you can comment it and other people who are in the course can see it. But other than that, yeah, it's entirely self-paced, offline. I'm technically available for additional coaching if you're looking for it. It's not something that's part of it. What we do for the role play sessions is we suggest to get either like a senior recruiter or your manager and then role play the specific scenario offline.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, it's interesting to me because I think when I think of even the training that I've received, I think a lot of it was so quick. So I think it's helpful to be able to, even for recruiters who have been recruiting for a year, like I think there's a
Yep.
lot more ongoing training. But I'm curious too, with COVID-19 and how things are affected, if you change your course at all, or what do you think some of the major key changes are right now and challenges that most recruiters are facing, or do you really see any kind of difference with everything that's going on?
So, it's funny that you asked that related to COVID-19 because I conceived of this course really at the same time that I started Vault Recruiting. But then the question was like, if I'm going to make a living, like, what do I do? Do I start doing what I do know how to do and make placements, or do I spend 6 months building a thing and then, make money down the line? So I kind of backburnered it. And COVID was a little bit of a blessing in disguise in the sense that since the recruiting business slowed down, I really got to be able to buckle down and build this thing. So to answer your question, in terms of content, COVID has not changed what's in the content. I do actually think that it is actually even more needed than it was before I started building it, just because now it's harder to shadow if everybody's working at home, right? It's harder to sit in and listen and kind of get that osmosis. What I will say has been a change in the course as the result of this year is diversity and inclusion. For obvious reasons, that has really come into the spotlight this year. And it's not something it's touched on in the course, but not very heavily. And so that's actually going to be the next program that comes out. Is I'm currently in talks with a couple different partners who are experts on the D&I side, and we're gonna release that hopefully in Q1.
Awesome, man. That's that'll be exciting. And I know we just kind of crossed over this, but Rickland just said, coincidentally, I wrote a post this morning on my LinkedIn page today, recognizing the hard work that recruiters do. Sometimes recruiters, especially headhunters, get a bad rap, usually because people don't realize the work that y'all do. And I think, to me, I think there are a lot of people who are confused about how much work really goes in to recruiting. And I think, when you first join a firm, it is just so focused on the sales side and it's super high burnout. But I think like the best recruiters I know, it's the relationship side, which really, really matters the most. And when you think about it from a sales aspect, you don't need 20 new clients a month to do well. You just need to do better with the clients that you already have. So I'm curious too, like from your point of view, in terms of like even like you said with that shadowing aspect. I mean, what advice do you give to people or to companies right now that don't have that? Don't have the in office where people can learn off each other. Like how are you recommending that people effectively shadow from other recruiters, or how, if you were new in the game, like what advice would you give to someone to really get a feel of how to handle things?
Yeah. By Volt Academy. No, I'm just kidding. So I would think that the first thing that is really important for you to do, and this is again, if you're coming in as a new person, become a functional expert in whatever it is that you recruit for. Even if it's not necessarily, even if you don't necessarily have to be an expert, but at least know enough to be dangerous. Spend some time on YouTube. If you recruit for tech, look up how the software development lifecycle works. Look at what does front end versus back end versus DevOps mean, right? And what that will do is that's learning that can be done on your own. That will make you more credible with the clients and candidates that you talk to. The other thing is, even if you can't listen in live, ask your candidate, say, hey, I'm still in the learning process. Is it okay if I record our call and so that I can listen back to it later? And provided they say yes, do it over Zoom, record it, and then run over the postmortem with somebody who's on your team and just kind of shadow after the fact, if that makes sense. I think those would probably be the two most effective ways that I could think of off the top of my head.
Why do you think, just in the recruiting world, why do you think training is just so bad? Like what's the root cause of that?
It's because it's something nobody plans to be. Think about the degrees that you have for that, that you can get in college that have to do with working in a corporate job. You have finance, you have accounting, you have HR, you have engineering. there's no recruiting course. There's no college course on how to do that. I think really the two most things, and if you think about it, who are like the two corporate functions that get excuse my French, shit on the most, right? It's recruiters and it's sales. What are the what are the two very common functional roles that you don't have in universities that the companies have? It's recruiting and sales, right? And people just get thrown in there, and there's really not an official playbook. And so what will happen is, your first couple of months on the job, I hate to say this, but like the people who you're interviewing are guinea pigs, right? Like I was told, like, just interview whoever you can, like, just learn. Like, okay, that's cool that I sat there and learned, but like that's a
doesn't really help anybody.
That's a person who like came to me and like expected me to work with them to find them a job, but like they didn't come here to be interviewed for me to practice on, right? And so I think just having more defined foundational knowledge around both recruiting and sales, I think would be incredibly helpful. And then if you could teach it at universities, if you can at least, even if it's not a full-blown degree program, maybe if it's a minor or like, just a few classes, I think that's something that would be extremely helpful in shaping the future of the industry.
Yeah, I wonder if even, just certification, like a vault certification,
there is a vault certification.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. And I think the other piece that I see is just, it's how people are compensated too. Like when, if you've got, somebody that's a full desk recruiter and they're on just commission, and then you're like, okay, I want you to train this other person. You've got to be able to compensate that manager or that trainer the right way so they are successful. And because otherwise it just seems like, I've seen people in a situation where they need help or they might need some guidance, but everybody's kind of doing their own thing within the office. So there's no one who's actually incentivized to help. And if they might feel like, okay, if I'm giving up my time, that's time that I could have been spent closing or making some money. So, but then there's the other side of it too, like say where to me, the most effective way is to separate the business functions and say, okay, you're going to start as a sourcer, then you're going to move into business development, then you're going to move into the recruitment side, or, you're not going to handle the cold calling. I'll handle the cold calling, but we'll tag team the interviews together. And it's like those types of tactics, they just don't get to, they don't seem to be used as much. But then they hurt with the overall reputation as well. That's why candidates get mad when they're on a call with a new recruiter and the recruiter's just using it literally as just a way to find out information. And then they never follow up with them, and that candidate's given them an hour's worth of their time. So, so I'm curious too, like where do people go to find out about the course? So like how can they get in contact with you about the course, and who would you be looking more for, like agency owners or just any kind of independent recruiter, or anybody who's kind of started up their own business? Like what's your key target market?
Yeah. So you can go to vaultacademy.io to check out the website. LinkedIn, I'm easy to find. I have a pretty unique spelling for my name, or you can just email me at riece@vaultacademy.io. In terms of who I'm targeting it at, I mean, there's really kind of a few audiences. The first one, yes, is agencies. Absolutely. That's kind of where our B2B sales process comes in. And where we find the most help is, either pre-boarding, as in, have this course done before you come on board, or keep at it for about half an hour to an hour a day, and you'll finish it in a few weeks. And it's really valuable to, I think, frankly, anybody with under a year of experience. The other thing would be if you are a split desk recruiter and you want to grow into more of a full desk function, you can either buy the full desk course, or you can buy the opposite of whatever it is that you do. Like if you're in biz dev, buy the recruiting course. And actually, it's funny. I didn't intend for it to do this, but we have gotten a few clients in who are just starting out with their own recruiting businesses and want to, have something a little bit more formalized. My very honest take on that is that it's a little bit of a dangerous or very risky endeavor to take if you've never done recruiting, to try to do it on your own without learning from a team. But I applaud anybody who's doing that. So, or if you're just an individual contributor at a company and you want to get better, those are the audiences that I think will really find a lot of value.
Do you think you'll end up doing anything on the corporate side of things, or like helping corporate recruiters, or could any corporate recruiters benefit from this course as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's certainly crossed my mind. I could talk product roadmap in a second here. Again, I don't want to mislead anybody. The course is meant for agency recruiters. There certainly will be nuggets that you can glean out of it. Like, the interview process is a little bit different for agencies than it is for in-house, right? Like in in-house, you're evaluating them for a certain job, or you're just generally pipelining them. Whereas in an agency, you can be placing them anywhere. There certainly would be value throughout the sourcing period. Managing, there's the chapters on prepping and debriefing and pre-closing certainly would be helpful. The chapters on closing would be helpful. It's just that the tone and verbiage throughout the entire thing is all geared towards agencies. It is likely that I will do something for corporate in the future. I think the D&I course that we have that's coming out would be definitely very useful. And then what the roadmap looks like for probably the next year is we are going to be creating courses on functional roles and functional expertise. So the most in-demand one is tech right now. And so I'll be working with some engineers to actually map out what a recruiting course for engineers would look like. And that would certainly be able to be used by corporate.
Yeah, man, that's super cool. So what are you just pulling in people or people you placed or just kind of founders you've worked with and kind of interviewing them on how they would want to be approached, or give me the breakdown of that, because that sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I actually right now in the full desk course, I'm the only one in the videos. They actually will be brought on as guest instructors and we'll record the programs together. But essentially what it will look like is sketching out the chapters and then the lessons within them. And then, yes, how they would want to be approached. That's part of it. What might be important to someone on the front end or someone on the back end. Like, for example, a lot of times people who are on the front end want to move into more of like a full stack position, right? And so being able to relay that, but then also like, how does front end work? What is involved in that? And so not only understanding the functional role itself, but understanding the people that are within these functional roles and how you can best appeal to them.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm curious too, like, how did you, as far as kind of like the framework for the course, like how did you get inspired to set it up the way you did, or like was there like a roadmap that you followed, or like how did you kind of map out that kind of full lesson of what people need to actually be covered to be successful?
Yeah. So what we do first is the first few chapters of the course are basically like getting your mind right, getting you introduced. Before we do any hands-on work, we cover like, how does the industry work? How do you think about your job? How do you plan out your day? And how do you present yourself to clients, to candidates, and to the world on LinkedIn or whatever social media platforms you choose to utilize, right? And then from there, we cover the top of the funnel on both sides. So then, I'm talking full desk here. We cover the top of the recruiting funnel: sourcing, interviewing, tracking, and then we cover the top on the other side of the job order funnel: prospecting, order intake. And then from there, we do matching and then covering the rest of the process. So we basically take the top of both funnels, and then once they come together, we go all the way through the rest of the placement process.
Nice, man. I love it. And what's been do you have any data on like how successful people have been after the course, or what's that kind of look like for people?
So we're actually working on putting case studies together as we speak. Anecdotally, what I can share is there was one company that we sold it to. It was just a one license deal, but they had somebody who is kind of underperforming. I think they were at about 8 months in, and they had made 2 placements. And what we actually did is, instead of having them start at the beginning, we were like, okay, where are your problem areas and what are you struggling with? Great, go watch those lessons first, and then do the rest when you have time. And so again, this is anecdotal, but within a month and a half, she had been able to make 2 more placements, which was basically what she'd done in the previous 8 months. And then there was one other company that had 5, and he said they're raving about it. Their results are doing great. I have to dig down more into exactly what that means, but I do know it's having an impact.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I would think too, having those different sections, and then if you're struggling with a certain area, or if you need help brushing up, I mean, it's a great tool to be able to have. So have you kind of seen it as that, where like if you are, let's say you're experienced in one skill set or you feel really comfortable, you're able then just to bring it out as kind of like a toolbox to go, okay, why don't we refresh on this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can review, you can log in, you can look at the material anytime, right? So let's say that you're about to have a difficult closing conversation with a candidate. Well, you want all your ducks in a row before you have that call, right? So part of that might be firing up the course and reviewing the closing conversation chapter and some of the different closing techniques. It might be, before interviews with a high-level candidate, review all of the interview section. And that is, again, one of the advantages versus like learning and figuring out what you did wrong after the fact, right?
Yep. No, I love it. And I see you're also, I know you're on the Recruiters Association. You're a board member too. What's kind of your role within that group? Yeah.
So the Recruiters Association, love those guys. I've been on the board for, gosh, is it December already? For about 9 months, or it's almost December. So so the Recruiters Association, we recently rebranded from the Silicon Valley Recruiters Association. We're now looking at more of like a nationwide approach, which I know you and we actually have to talk about that. But what we do is we basically provide a community and network specifically for recruiters. Our base is about 50% agency, about 50% in-house. But we have things like a private Slack channel where if, somebody can ask questions like, hey, I'm evaluating ATSs to implement, like, what are your guys' experience with this? We put on events. There's actually one with CBRE, which is, I believe, next week or the week after. And then we also help with things like, obviously the recruiting community is taking a pretty hard hit this year, like in terms of job openings. And so, we have even like a job openings channel on our Slack channel where we're like, hey, I know this, either I'm hiring or I know somebody who's hiring, like, let's help get you guys back to work. So it's been a great community. I'm happy to be a part of it. And then what I do specifically is I head up the mentorship program.
Cool.
So I work with, yeah, right. Exactly. So we have some really, really experienced people, both on the agency and on the in-house side. And so basically I've recruited those mentors to get them into the organization. And then we have mentees who are usually, junior to mid-level individual contributors, although we do have a couple higher level people in there, who I then work on matching and pairing up with the mentors. And so what it is it'll be usually a Zoom call for like 45 minutes once a month. And then the person who's being mentored will they'll share a list beforehand with all of the mentors and be like, here's what I'm struggling with. Here, can we talk about this? And so you do have to have what's called the premium membership for that, which is a whopping, I think, $70 a year. But it's free for anybody who has that premium membership. And so it's a really great value add.
So that's nationwide now then. So like anybody could join that group, or how do you kind of get into that group?
Yeah. So you can actually sign up directly off of the website for a premium membership. We are actually, if anybody's listening, looking for a few different chapter heads. So if you're in a major metro city and you're interested in heading up, like, say, the New York Recruiters Association chapter, we're currently on the look for a couple of those. But in the meantime, anybody can sign up on the website, get entered into the Slack channel. And since all of our events are virtual right now, you can obviously join all of the events from anywhere.
Awesome. So I guess in terms of like what you're doing with Vault Academy, has it been the kind of overlapping, or have you seen that as like an opportunity for people to kind of go through the course as well? Has that been a good kind of gateway into to getting into places?
I don't like to use my position on the board to generate more business for myself proactively. If I'm asked, I will. And a couple of people have approached me and we're having conversations about it basically as we speak. And the same thing for recruiting, right? Like I recruit recruiters. Being on the board with a bunch of recruiters, I've actually made a couple placements. Actually, Tom, yeah, I think Buffalo would probably be on there. But
are you connected? Are you connected with Tom too? Do you know Tom?
I'm not. No, I'm not sure who Tom is, but we can always catch up afterwards.
Tom, definitely send Riece a connection request, and you guys can connect.
But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I actually have placed a couple of people out of the Recruiters Association for orders that I already had open. So there is a little bit of overlap, but I deliberately try to keep a little bit of space.
Got it. Makes sense. So so for 2021 with Vault Academy, you is that D&I initiative? Is that kind of on the in the plan for 2021, or what does 2021 look like for the Academy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I have lofty goals for it. I actually just hired an SDR who started a couple of weeks ago, whose his full-time job is selling it B2B. I'm kind of acting as the account executive in the situation for now until I can hire somebody for it. The way it works right now is that the courses are they're either single purchase where you can buy up front, or you can do it over like a 6-month installment if you want to lighten the initial hit on your pocketbook a little bit. What I plan on doing is, once I've built more content, I'm planning on turning it into more of a subscription model where you just pay basically a monthly access fee and you have access to all of the courses. Cool. So that, D&I, tech, D&I I'd like to have wrapped by the end of Q1, the tech course by the end of Q2. I probably shouldn't say too much because it's not inked yet, but we are in a talk with a major recruiting organization to partner on selling the Academy. So I'm really excited about that. But really the plan is just to continue to grow the business, continue to expand the base of content. And what I would really like it to be is like the educational hub for recruiters, right? So right now what we have is kind of more of like an MVP, but eventually there will be so much content in there that you can be like, if I have a question about anything, whether it's a functional role, whether it's a certain technique, I can go to Vault Academy and learn that. And that's ultimately what I would like it to be.
Yeah, I love it, man. Almost like a database where, like, if you need help with sourcing or Boolean or closing. Yeah, yep. I love it. Well, man, I know it always flies by, but we've been live for about 40 minutes here.
Sure.
I'm just, just before we get off here, one of the ways I've been closing up the show is just, obviously with everything going on, it's kind of a challenging time for people, particularly if they're just starting in recruiting. So
yep.
What advice would you give to someone right now that's, maybe they're stuck at home working, they're pretty new to recruiting, they're just having challenges with the whole process. Like, what advice would you give to someone right now, and what resources would you offer them as well that maybe they could, get a hold of for, just to kind of help them out right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my advice would be, A, this too shall pass, and B, use the time when everybody is having a harder time to set yourself up for success. The people who really build relationships here, the people who really, who are not transactional, who are really taking the time to get to know their clients and candidates and provide them value beyond just finding work for them, right? I've talked to 100 people this year where I'm like, yeah, I'd love to place you, but like I don't have as much going on. I have these other things that I'm working on. But here's just like an introduction to somebody I know in my network who, even if I don't get paid, like, just talk to them. They might have work. Here's somebody who might be able to mentor you. And so paying it, I guess paying it forward is the wrong term, but like providing something of value, anything you can do, whether even if it's something small, like, a resume tip, will really build loyalty and build you that network so that when things do come around, you're the first person that they call. So play the long game. That's my advice.
100%. Well, I love it, Riece, and I appreciate your time. For anyone who is out there that's interested in the Vault Academy, you can go to vaultacademy.io and just check out the resources that are there. And then, Riece, are we good for people to connect with you on LinkedIn as well? Or are there any other good ways to find you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. And then again, my email is riece@vaultacademy.io.
Awesome. All right. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time. And anyone who's out there who isn't connected with Riece, connect with him. We'll look forward to seeing what 2021 brings. And Tom just says spot on. I'm sure he'll be connecting with you. But yeah, I appreciate your time and appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
All right, man. I'm going to end this broadcast. If you just want to stay on for a moment.